Hi, do we have Craste joining? Okay, got it. Hi, Imansha.
Hi.
How are you?
Good, good. Finally.
Yes, sorry about the little delay at my end. I'm still trying to get the hang of Instagram Lives, and I at times get stuck with how it works.
That's
But
no
thank you
problem.
for joining. And I'll start with a quick introduction, and then we can just jump into a few questions that we have for you this afternoon. So, Craste is an innovative startup that transforms crop stubble into, which is a major pollutant from burning practices, into eco-friendly packaging and particle boards. And this aims to combat environmental degradation while providing economic benefits to farmers as well. So, with that introduction, could you tell us a little bit more about Craste and the inspiration behind the startup?
See, so crop burning is nothing new, and like if everybody's watching TV, we all hear this news, and Parali burning, Delhi's choke, a lot of those things are just flooding our news channels, and it's not a one-time thing; it's an every year thing. And every year around the harvest season, our news is full of farmers being even targeted at many times, right? That, why are you burning the crop? And, the city pollution and air pollution and whatnot. So, my brother and I, my brother Shubham, went to Imperial and, he was working on carbon capturing. So, it was around that time when we were in England and we used to hear this news and we used to also see BBC pointing it out everywhere. So a lot of that thing used to come that what is it that, about crop burning and why is it that the issue is so prevalent? So my brother came back to India with a fellowship called Soch. So it's basically a fellowship that allowed him to do, basically like rural immersion. So going to a lot of farm areas and understand what is the issue regarding crop burning. And one of the things that still rings in our ears is that the farmers tell us, before the smoke hit your cities, it affects our lungs, right? So it's
Right.
not that the farmers want to burn the crop, is that there is no solution. So
Right.
whilst there is a lot of agri products in the market, and I'm sure you would, next time you eat a chaat, you'll see like a bagasse plate or whatever, it's flooded. The agri products are,
Right.
in the market. The actual stubble which is being burnt is not something that people can utilize, unfortunately. And the
Okay.
reason is the high silica. So that's where Craste came into the picture because we are both scientists, and the idea was to try and utilize the stubble which is being burnt and basically, stop this burning, stop crop burning. So that's what the entire intent behind the foundation of the company.
Right. So you mentioned that, this is a problem which happens every year, especially in the north and the eastern part of India. This is something which has been there for almost a decade now, if not more. Um, and uh, I think as a consequence of that, farmers are definitely targeted because of it, because that's some of the origin of, the pollutants entering the atmosphere. And like you mentioned, that it's something which they don't really want to do, but they don't really have an option other than to burn that waste, other than to burn that residue. So, firstly, what is the scale of this? Like, we understand that this is a problem, but what is the kind of scale that we are dealing with in terms of crop stubble burning? And secondly, in terms of uh, the alternatives behind it, apart from burning or converting it into some products. So is burning the only solution if they're not converted into products or converted into something else, or is there something
Um,
else that people are also exploring?
Yeah, so to answer your first question on the scale, right? So, India is a very heavy agrarian economy. most of our community is basically it's built on agriculture. India alone produces 500 million tons of crop every year, and that's
Mhm.
basically like your entire West combined, right? So we are basically like one of the largest producers of crop residue in the world. Out
Right.
of that, almost 90 to 100 million tons is just burnt. So that's the scale that we're dealing with. In fact, from the recent reports, if you see, living in Delhi at the time of harvest is basically smoking a pack of cigarettes every day. And
Right.
that's the kind of air quality issue that, and see, I'm only talking about Delhi, but Delhi is not the only thing that is being,
Definitely.
yeah. So recently, we've seen news that, basically the smoke covers the entire area. So now the scale is vast. The raw material which is currently being burnt is at a humongous state, right? Coming to your second question, why this burn, right? Why this burning? See, now when farmers harvest the crop and then when they sow the next season, there is a very short window that they get. And in that short window, most of our farmers, unfortunately, are not equipped with, heavy machineries, or they are not as rich as to, get labor. So labor costs money, everything costs money. And like not my words, but a farmer's word that if I can use 1 rupee matchstick, why would I spend that much money? Because I don't have that much. Right. So then you're dealing with something where one thing, the alternative of burning is like costing 1 rupee matchstick, and the other alternative is to buy heavy machineries and invest in that. They won't do that.
Right.
So rich farmers may do that, but so government has done couple of things, like government has provided them with happy seeder, which is a machinery. Pusa decomposting pills are also prevalent. It's just that the decomposition takes time. So then there is a trade-off that. So therefore it's a very tricky situation whilst everybody is trying to figure out what to do with it. So what we did basically is to provide money for this waste. Now we
Right.
provide 6 times more money than they could get for biofuel company or a briquette company. So when you
Okay.
provide good income, so a secondary income to the farmers, they then can manage to, cut the waste, which is what is happening now.
Right.
So a biga would cost around 3,000 to 4,000 rupees. We give them more money for that, so it accounts for that. It's all about like how you can also make it entrepreneurial model for the farmers, right?
Right.
So
Right. There need to be
some
sort of
incentive.
proper incentives for them to also not burn it. Uh,
Exactly.
Definitely. So, can you walk us through the process of turning this crop residue into usable products at Craste, and what does that transformation entail essentially?
Yeah, so before I move into that, I just also want to talk about one more very essential thing here is that when we talk about the entire residue, we also talk about husk that is separated from the grain,
Right.
and then the stalk, and then
Okay.
comes your stubble.
Okay.
So the reason why I'm segregating it is because the stubble burning is prevalent, not the husk, not the residue, because that is used as fodder. And I get this a lot, that farmers can use it as a fodder. The thing is that stubble cannot be used as a fodder.
Right.
So in Craft, and I will, focus on Craft technology now. So at Craft, what we did, we basically developed two types of technology and then two types of products. So our first technology is able to make pulp out of the stubble.
Okay.
And why is that such an important thing? You may ask, because pulp and paper is nothing new. I think ever since China invented paper technology, nobody really put in a lot of innovation into making it better, I would say.
Right.
So it's a very conventional industry, it's a very traditional industry, and that's where science came in, and that's where we came in. So we saw this is a very traditional industry, and we can definitely improve that. So we started by working on different type of stubble. So one of the first difficulties was to use silica. So we started to manage silica through our technology in a way that we don't actually use a lot of water or a lot of thermal energy or a lot of chemical, and yet we are able to make pulp. So that's the first product that we were able to crack, and we have a patent granted from India on that. This
Okay.
pulp then can be sent to any paper maker or anything basically. So it can be converted into tableware, paper, stationery, whatever your paper need is.
Okay.
The second thing is, so before I move to the second thing, just one more thing I would like to add is that alongside crop burning and air pollution through external things, there is also an indoor pollution that we all inhale,
Right.
and which is basically formaldehyde. So
Hmm.
all our furniture, our MDF, our plywood, particle board, all of that contains this really toxic glue. So it's a
Okay.
glue that holds the wood particle together, but it's a carcinogen and it
Okay.
remains inside our homes for a very long time. So much so that, Dyson air purifier are now focusing on formaldehyde free indoor air. So
Oh.
it's a huge issue. So with that background comes our second product. So our second product was basically to use this stubble
Hmm.
and make a replacement for plywood altogether. And
Okay.
save trees in the process. You don't have to cut trees for your construction or your furniture. But what we did differently and what is our USP is we don't use formaldehyde. So not
Okay.
only is it a tree-free alternative to plywood, it is also a healthier, much healthier alternative, which will keep your indoor air much better.
Okay.
So doing that, we are clearing out the outside air pollution by saving, by reducing crop burning, but at the same time, clearing out indoor air pollution by not having formaldehyde. So these are the two products that Craste now does using this stubble.
Okay. That's great. So you mentioned that there are different types of, if I got it right, that there are different types of crop residues of stubble that you end up working with. So is there any specific types that you work with, and does it also affect the quality of the final products that you are
So
building?
see, yeah, so that's a great question because I'm very happy to answer this because this is also something that a lot of our customers would, always feel that if I'm using a rice board or a mustard board or a
Right.
bagasse board, like, so see, our patent and our technology is not on the product for that reason. It is
Hmm.
basically on the process. So no
Okay.
matter what raw material goes inside this process, the final product remains consistent,
All
and
right.
that's what we have been able to achieve, and this is exactly why we've also received a lot of government grants and awards and funds around that, because it's a technological intervention where, see, making a product is not a very big deal, but
Right.
making a consistent product, making something that can really disrupt the traditional industry is what you would want to do.
Right.
Right, like if we want to, utilize all that 100 million tons which is being burnt, I want my consumer to get it. So
Right.
to answer your question, the quality of the product is not affected. However, you can give me any waste and I'll give you a board or a paper out of it. So
Right.
we've also made paper out of sanitary pad waste. We've made paper out of textile waste. So we've
Hmm.
put all that waste into our technology and we have been able to create, products.
Right. So the technology of the process is such that it doesn't really limit your capability or your ability to convert as much stubble as possible, given that there is enough demand in the market to
Yeah,
cater to that.
yeah, yeah. See, and it is also important because most of the agri businesses, and I would like to emphasize again, see, boards or paper is not something new, but most of the agri businesses fail because of the logistic cost that the transportation of stubble is, and so most people decide, okay, who's gonna get into that.
Right.
So even if there are people who would want to work with stubble, it is impossible because the logistic cost would be much higher, creating a much expensive product which cannot
Mhm.
disrupt. So it's a whole chain. We work with different stubble so that we can work with various crops across the year and across India.
Right.
Right. So, if that, so for instance, I'll give you an example in North India where our current pilot factory is, we work with mustard because mustard is in abundance and it is being burnt. Whereas
Right.
in South India, there is a lot more rice and bagasse. So we work with that, right? So we reduce the
Right.
carbon footprint of logistics and we can move around depending on the crop that the farmers have to give us.
Okay. Makes sense. So you touched upon the costs associated with, converting this stubble into usable products. So what is the economic viability of using crop residue for manufacturing? compared to traditional processes or materials?
See, economic viability oftentimes in this industry is directly translated to volumes. So,
Right.
so the higher the volume is, the most cost competitive you can be.
Mm-hmm.
And sadly, because, like I said, right, like it is difficult to work with stubble, it is difficult to work with a lot of volume around, because if you have to transport the crop, it takes a lot more logistic cost. It becomes expensive. So, in order to reduce that cost, is what we've done. So, we've come up with a business model where we basically try to be cost competitive. So, if you have to buy a plywood right now and you go to the market,
Mm-hmm.
if you have a chance to buy an Action Tessa HDHMR board, my board will always be 1 rupee cheaper than that.
Okay.
So also to give the consumer more of a incentive to buy a better product, I would say better because your furniture will not feel a difference by using our board, but your forest will, your air
Right.
will, your society will, your farmers will be more like richer. So economy wise, we are completely, to the cost competitiveness as the industry wants.
Okay. Coming to the impact side of it, since I think that's what I think the underlying goal or the underlying vision translates to in some shape or form. So, how do you measure the overall impact of your initiatives on air quality and pollution reduction? Is it in the form of the volume converted into products, or are there any other metrics as well?
So see, there's a very systemic approach that is being taken. So we are going through an entire LCA and EPTs done, which are done by third parties basically. So they do auditing of the entire plant, and yes, so it does account for, say, if there is an acre of land where this is the volume of the stubble which would have been burnt if we were not to collect it. So that's the kind of carbon emission we have been able to reduce. Now, then the other calculation would be done based on, say, if you have a furniture. So if you use, like, if you have a bed, you probably cut like an entire tree of 9 feet tall for that.
Right.
Whereas now you don't have to do that, and the entire 1 acre farm was able to make your bed. So then you
Right.
reduce carbon emission there. So these are the metrics that people tend to, see in terms of environmental metrics. In terms of social metrics, the idea is to account for how much money is being given to the farmers. So,
Right.
for instance, we provide 40% more income to them on top of what they're earning, say, per acre. So, in an acre, if the income is X amount, it will be 40% extra if they were to also sell the stubble of that at a price that we are accommodating. So
Okay.
these are the metrics, but see, we do third party verification with that. Don't
Right.
take our words, take the industry
No,
words.
that's I like from a. I think what I wanted to touch upon was more um, from a perspective of how you within the organization, how you inform your strategies. Are your strategies informed by certain goals on these metrics, or are they primarily informed by metrics more on the economics of it rather than
See,
the impact?
I would say it's a balance between the two of them, because
Hmm.
a business has to have that complete balance on that. So
Right.
when we look at an area, we want to see, okay, if there's 100% crop burning happening, can we at least reduce it down to 60% for the next season? So
Right.
that would give us a target of how many farmers should we really connect with, what kind of material we want. But it works hand in hand, because if I don't have orders to go out, I can't use that material,
Okay.
right? So then it goes hand in hand with the economic side of it as well, that you want to sell that much so that you can get more raw material. So it's basically like a complete cycle of that. So
Okay.
I'll give you an example. If I have to make 500 boards in a day, I can utilize 20 tons of raw material, right?
Right.
But if I'm only making 100 boards a day, then obviously my raw material consumption is lower, which means that me going to farmers is going to be lower and all the impact is going to be lower.
Right.
So this is how it works.
It needs to be driven from the demand as well,
It
for
needs to
sure.
be driven. So we do both approaches basically. So we try, so that is why we focus on quality a lot, because let's
Okay.
face it, even though everybody will talk a lot about sustainability, honestly the actual action when it comes to consumption, people will go for quality more. And you can, if I give you the board for your dream house, and you can, maybe go and check with your parents, and you can ask them that, hey, this is a tree free board, this is a formaldehyde free board, it's
Right.
amazing. The first thing that will come in their mind, is it durable, is it termite resistant, is it going to last long, right? Like the concept of, is it going to last long? So
Right.
your environmental approach takes a back seat that time, and your durability takes, and that's a consumer's mindset, and
Right.
that's fair to have, right? This is the market. So we worked on quality more, so that when I go to my consumer, I said, listen, if you don't want to think about tree free or whatever, I'm giving you a quality which is as good as a plywood. Take it,
Right.
right?
And I think a lot of it also boils down to beyond quality. It also boils down to the cost of it, to the pricing point.
Exactly, exactly.
Like one of the, for example, especially in the apparel space, there have been a lot of companies that have come up with organic or sustainable clothing for a long time now. But there's still a lack of mass adoption in that space simply because it's not economically viable for a lot of people, even though it's sustainable, even if it's, much more environment friendly. So I think that apart from quality, price is something which also determines the adoptability of products
Exactly.
significantly, especially in these regards.
Yeah. And that's how you do your market research. So to begin with, our market, beachhead market, has been Bangalore, which has already adapted quite a lot into sustainable infrastructure. So you also, it's a whole trade-off. But
Right.
I'm glad you mentioned cost here, because that's precisely why people find it very difficult to adopt to sustainable practices. So at
Right.
Craft, our vision is that sustainability should be a household norm. It should not be something you do out of the extraordinary. It should be the most ordinary thing that you do. Like it should become your daily routine.
Right. I think, yeah, that's where we need to head to.
Yeah.
Hopefully, we get there.
Yeah, you don't have to talk about it. Hey, today I'm eating organic, or today I'm eating, or
Exactly.
I have a sustainable thing. No, it should be such a norm that it doesn't have to be even talked about.
Right. It's part of your daily lives. It's
Exactly.
integrated, well integrated in your daily routine.
And that's
True.
the vision of our company.
Amazing. So just to, I think, go back to the question, I think I initially talked about, the scale of the problem, and I think you mentioned that it is roughly 90 to 100 million tons of stubble that ends up being burned every year. Um, so to help us understand the gap between the problem and the solutions that are trying to solve that problem. So out of that 90 to 100 million tons of waste, how much of it is being converted currently into some usable products uh, with companies like Craste or any other company as well? Is there any
Um,
I don't know, are there any data
well,
points
I
around it
think
just
that
to
I'm just
understand the
going to be
gap?
boasting about Craft from this answer.
That's
But
totally fine. That's totally fine.
see, like, in the very beginning, like I said, that stubble has been a very big issue to use, and, especially rice or wheat. And the reason is high silica. So big. So even if there is a very good intention of of people wanting to really do something about crop burning, the moment it touches stubble, it affects their machinery. It's a very abrasive nature
And
compound. So, it can destroy the entire plant. Now, if you've invested a lot of money in your plant, you don't want to use raw material. So so it limits it massively.
okay.
So most people and the agri products that come, either you will see bagasse as products, but bagasse is not actually coming from the actual farms. You're not using the sugarcane waste. You're actually using bagasse as a byproduct of a sugar mill.
Right.
So then you're not really in the sphere of crop burning. You are in the sphere of tree free products, which is equally great, and you're giving a great alternative raw material. But stubble again is left to burn,
Okay.
right? So, and you can Google that. Most times if you just see tree-free alternative, you'll just find bagasse like flooded with bagasse.
Okay.
Um, with respect to rice, very few people try and work with that. I actually don't know of any myself as much. I think, but they also work with the husk. So husk is a softer fiber, and then when they use husk, they also mix it with recycled fiber or wood fiber, because you need longer fiber when you're converting something. So there are two challenges. One is a short fiber of a stubble. The second is high silica. So either you will get a hybrid of that, or you will just work again with the husk, not the stubble. So
Okay.
now coming to the boasting part of it, Craft has been able to solve both the issues.
All right.
So we've been able to make 100% stubble products. We don't
Okay.
use even like a thread of wood in it, and we don't have to, basically. The reason is because our technology has overcome the issue of short fibers, or it has overcome the issue of silica. So our plan is now to license this to most people, and
Okay.
basically expand by taking these pulp and plywood industries to expand with the technology and utilize as much crop waste as possible.
Great. So we talked about we talked a lot about on the supply side of things and utilizing stubble. But on the demand side, on the consumer front, how do you engage with local communities and stakeholders to promote awareness about the benefits of using crop residue-based products? You mentioned that this is a challenge for sure on the demand side. So how do you address it as well?
So um, it's a very interesting thing, because when we first started, it was all about bombarding people with a lot of stats about save the planet, save the planet, save the planet,
Right.
right? And to be very honest, it only attracts a very limited crowd.
Okay.
And you may say this is unfortunate. I don't think it is. I think it's just the consumer mindset works along that way, that people have
Right.
a very short bandwidth of thinking about climate change. I mean, we've been talking about it from a decade. What has happened? Nothing. Right? So
Right.
clearly, there is a huge gap between when we talk about it and when we really translate it into a demand side of it.
Mhm.
So there are two ways to handle it. One, we understood that if we have to do that, let's not change the mindset of local communities, but the mindset of local corporations. So we
Okay.
worked with AB and Bev, for instance. We launched Corona beer packaging with them. It's a big corporate. Now,
Right.
when you work with a corporate like that, then the number and the volumes that they work with changes. So when you go and buy a Colgate toothpaste and it comes in a sustainable packaging, I mean, you will have to get a sustainable packaging,
Right.
right? You actively might not want to get it, but that change can come from that level of working with the corporations. The second thing is I will bring back the point again, quality.
Right.
So the way we spread awareness is we first make people talk about like how good the quality is, like do you like to use it. Now it comes with an added benefits, which is basically by holding this panel you've saved this much crop burning, by holding this panel you've saved like this much hectare of forest, and that then makes people feel happy. So the way we do it is we make people feel sustainability as an added bonus to what they already require in
Right.
life, right? So it's not that they need it or they want it, but they are getting it. It's a co-benefit.
So it's not sustainability is not the primary driver. It's something which is an added advantage to their regular needs and requirements.
Yeah.
Is what works essentially,
What
right?
works? Yeah. See, I mean, in a utopian world, you'll want everybody to care about everything, but
Right.
we don't live in a utopian world, right?
That's true. And you make a fair point, right? We've been talking about it for so long, and people do get excited about, the solutions that come up or, trying to make a difference, but it's very short-lived,
Yeah.
right? It comes and goes,
Immediately.
and then, your real life problems sort of just overpower everything else that the planet is facing, for example, right? But yeah, I think the adoption comes at scale, and probably needs to be driven by companies, consumer goods companies that are operating at scale already, because most of the waste or most of the, especially on the waste side, that's where uh, most of the waste comes from packaging of various products that we end up using. So if we completely change the packaging of those products, then yeah, the consumers don't really need to think about it at an individual level, but they can just
Exactly.
be a
Exactly.
participant in the entire journey.
Yeah, yeah. So, I mean, so government can improve. So, government has done one thing, for instance, you only pay 12% taxes, 12% GST on a non-timber product. So, that's another way of promoting that. So, if you
Right,
were to buy our board, you will only pay 12% as opposed to 18% GST on a plywood.
right,
So, that'll save cost. So, it does boil down to, can I save money and can I get a good
right,
quality? Once my criteria of these two things is fulfilled, if I'm also getting something which is helping the environment, that just makes me feel amazing, right?
right.
So it's like big, bigger, and biggest.
Great. So that was actually my next question around government intervention, because there have been a lot of policies. There have been a lot of changes at the policy level to, solve for this and to help reduce the impact of pollution, especially during these months. Has there been an active and a considerable support from the government as well to help take these products to market? GST being
Oh yes,
one example.
yes, yes. And in our first pilot plant is completely funded by Punjab government.
Okay.
Right. So see, so I'll tell you what. So both my brother and I, we spent a good amount of time, like over a decade in England. We started our ideas and companies and the whole thing about carbon capturing in England. What we did see is that the government of India was providing way more support than you can
Right.
find anywhere else, and we've been very lucky and fortunate to be able to get that. So we were able to do most of our research through grants like BIREC and Department of Biotechnology.
Okay.
There are a lot of things that the government currently is doing for startup like ours, who are in the sector of improving agricultural economy or improving the lives of farmers or environment. So that support to boost the startup is there. Now coming to the post market sector, right? So I already told you one thing is that the reduction of GST on a non timber product itself is quite a lot of push onto to go non timber, to use something which is an alternative material. So like that, government is also incorporating things that you have to have a certain percentage of green building materials now. And we've all heard that India wants to go net zero, carbon net zero by 2050
Right.
in its infrastructure as well. How do you achieve that? You achieve that by incorporating green building materials. So
True.
when government brings in these kind of policies, it helps startup like ours who are building green building material, and there are many others, like Craste as well, who can then enter into the market easily. So there is a swift entry because of the government. Government is also a customer at the end of the day.
Right.
So they also end up buying things and helping and supporting. And we're in a good space right now, and Indian government currently is really doing well for these things. We've been very fortunate to work with them.
Great. So that leads my last question that I had on this. So for other impact startups, especially those tackling environmental issues, what advice would you give them to navigate their journey? Because they definitely need support from the government to be able to create impact at scale, and to actually push on their mission and vision of their organization. So, what advice would you give them in terms of navigating this
Yeah.
journey, especially in the early days?
Yeah, so when you are basically pre-concept phase, when you're in ideation stages, I would say that what would help is to have awareness about what all competitions, grants, and these equity-free awards are coming in. So if you were to work with the government, there are two ways that they can navigate around. First is the CSR funding, which can basically be availed by corporations. So a lot of corporates actually have CSR fund, which is mandated by the government again,
Right.
for them to use that fund to go either in a sector of sustainability or innovation or help a startup. So that's already one thing. So they can actively look for these CSR funds and actively start talking to corporates by going to amazing events that they can network. Networking would be my first and biggest, I would say, advice to anybody who is in a startup sector at any stage. It doesn't matter. The second is to regularly get updated by Startup India, by gov.in, by DBT, by Reg. So there are a lot of those things that come handy. One of the things that helped us is to also join accelerator program and to join an incubation center. So in India, we joined Venture Center. That's in
Okay.
Pune. And because it was a good environment with a lot of startups, around, you get help and you get to know about these things from each other as well. So a lot of times we got to know from a fellow startup or from people in Venture Center who then say, listen, this is coming up, apply for the award. Apply. Even if the application is tedious and it seems as if it's too big, like a whole PhD application, still apply. The chances are that the government has funds, it's just that they don't have people who are seeking them.
True. Great. That's amazing. And and it was lovely to learn about Trust and the work that you're doing. Thank you for taking the time to talk about it.
Thank you for having
And
me.
would look forward to what you guys continue doing in this space and to further milestones that Trust achieves in the future.
Your next office has to be done by Craste. Let's see.
Definitely. Definitely. We'll do that. We're in a remote setup right now, but our first office, I would say, would have to be done by Craft.
Amazing.
Okay. Thank
Okay,
you so
thank
much for the
you. Thank you so
conversation.
much. Thanks.